Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. Going to have all throughout free agency, we'll have a free agency tracker for every team, including the Commanders. So analysis on every pick, and it's all on the Commanders homepage on ESPN.com. So go up there now. I have analysis on today's signings, Will Harris, and then a re-signing of Jeremy McNichols. So you can go read my thoughts on pros and cons of that, what it means, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also, in a minute, I'll be joined by the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein, as we go over the first couple of days of the legal tampering period. Free agency, of course, begins at 4 o'clock Wednesday. That's when deals become official. The trade for Laremy Tunsil becomes official. And of course, there will be another wave of players being signed. So just head to ESPN.com for that. And as I record this at 9:45, there have been no more signings yet. There have been a couple updated signings. One, Joey Bosa went to the Bills. And it wouldn't have shocked me if this team were in on Bosa because they still want to get that edge rusher. One guy floating out there, DeMarcus Lawrence, of course, played for Dan Quinn. Could he be a fallback guy? And I think, he had some pretty good years under Dan Quinn. So that would make some sense if they wanted to go that route. Bram and I do not talk about that because we did get into a lot of stuff, but that's, could I see you bring in a veteran like that? And to me, you'd still then go draft a guy. We'll see what happens, but that's still a name out there. It's a name with a connection. It makes sense. We'll see if it makes sense, as much sense to them or how much dollars and cents it makes to them for sure. So anyways, so there will be more to talk about, and I will be back on, as news warrants. If there's a big signing tomorrow, I'll put another video out talking about that. For now, as of now, the next podcast would come out Thursday morning, wrapping up the first day of free agency and just kind of looking ahead a little bit as well. So, anyways, so before I get to Bram, just a couple things. We did talk to a couple of the resigning guys today, Zach Ertz and John Bates, and just wanted to point out it's funny because. With Zach Ertz, he talked about how Bates was like the most dominant run blocking tight end that he has seen. And I think, it's funny because in watching Will Harris tape today, I was watching his game against the Washington, and I saw a couple blocks by Bates. He's just taking on defensive end, and you roll it back. You're like, that's just impressive. That's what Ertz sees. So they really love that tight end room. And John Bates said it's the most fun he's had playing since high school. It's hard to duplicate that, but if you get the right guys with the right attitude, and I think they do, then you can certainly you continue to have a good culture year after year after year. And I'm saying that, and it only took 1 year to get to this point, but you bring the right people in, and that's what happens. So, and then as far as Ertz, somebody did ask him, like, when did you know you wanted to basically come back? And he said, well, if that Eagles game ended at 6 o'clock, he knew at 6:01 he wanted to be back. So anyways, the point is he really wanted to come back, and that was known all along. Like, he made no secret about his love for Cliff Kingsbury, but also his love for Jaden Daniels. And so that's why he's back. And it makes all the sense in the world. And there you go. Anyways, so that's it for me. So here's my conversation with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. All right, Bram. So I don't know what people expected. It hasn't been this really huge flurry of activity, but one huge move. So I'm curious from your perspective, the first couple of days of this legal tampering period, free agency actually starts on Wednesday, of course, 4 o'clock. That's when they can sign. But the early activity, what's been your take so far? What have you liked? What do you wonder about?
Well, I think the Laremy Tunsil deal was really out of the blue. I didn't see that coming. I was surprised. I think it fills a massive, massive need. I think it changes the dynamics of their offensive line across the board and will have massive ramifications on the team. And so I think it's a huge, huge, huge deal.
Right.
Outside of that, I think we've talked about this privately, not here too much, maybe a little bit here. And I've talked about it on my show a lot. Look at the list of free agents that were available.
Right.
Where were they going to spend a lot? I didn't see a lot of players on that list if they were ever to get to free agency, and a lot of them didn't. Ronnie Stanley didn't. Darius Slayton stays. Chris Godwin stays. Like there aren't many what I would describe as difference-making players that you're going to throw a ton of money to. So, like, I'm not surprised that this first wave when Josh Sweat gets the contract he got or Milton Williams got the contract he got, that they weren't in on something like that because it just didn't, none of it felt like the right moves for them. So I think the Tunsil one was a big time surprise and a really needed, necessary thing. We can, argue about the price paid, but like I would do this every day of the week with what they
I'm
got.
fine with it.
And then we can still discuss that there are a lot of holes, but that was to me on the first wave of free agency, completely predictable based on what the options were in front of them.
They filled a major spot because the whole trickle down effect of Tunsil is Coleman going to another spot. So it's not even just oh, you need a left tackle, you got a left tackle, but you got a left tackle, and now you can put a good young offensive lineman, whether it's right tackle or guard. Now you look at you have a core of an offensive line that you can grow and develop with that can be together for a while and protect your main asset in Jaden Daniels. So, and then you would hope be better in the run game. So
Yeah.
there's a trickle down effect of that move that I don't think you would have felt like you go out and get Josh Sweat. Like, I don't know about you. Would you rather have paid Josh Sweat that money or go draft one in the first round? And I think, is he going to be that? He's obviously a good pro, but for that level of money, I don't
Yeah.
know. And so I think like, there are a couple that I was watching, Bram, was Ronnie Stanley was one, Khalil Mack. If they weren't going to trade for Trey Hendrickson, then Khalil Mack to me made a lot of sense. And I think they would
Sure.
have been in on him for sure. Because you could get him if you wanted to draft somebody, you're saving picks and you get him for a year, he can still play. He can be that guy you want. I don't know that there was that guy beyond him, like is who could impact both the pass and the run. So, I'm not surprised that they didn't get that, but they did fill a big spot and they solidified and that offensive line, I think, is in really good shape right now. Now, I will say, people got to get ready. There are gonna be a lot of false start penalties with Tunsil. It's okay. He's still a very good tackle. I like that move.
Yeah, that's like if that's the knock on him, I can live with that.
Yeah.
And you know what? Maybe a lot of that was happening because their offense was upside down last year. Like, so
This has been 5 years going. This is not
okay.
just a one-time thing.
Yeah. Well, like if that's the big knock on him, you know what else? I like him. If Dallas is going to line up Micah Parsons against him,
Yes.
I like that matchup better.
Me too. Yeah,
He's
I
going to have
agree.
to block either Kayvon Thibodeau or Brian Burns. I like that matchup better
Correct.
now that he's there. And then I don't know where Coleman's going to go yet. I'm waiting to hear from Dan Quinn and them about that. Like I personally think he's going to end up being a guard, but I don't know. Maybe he will move to right tackle. Andrew Wiley's still on this team. Like people talked about a cap savings with him. He is still here right now. And then just consider this for a moment. And I don't know that they'll do this, but Tunsil at left tackle, potentially Coleman at guard, Biotish at center when Cosme comes back. If they were to spend a late first round pick, projected where there are some tackles that are viable and available for them, if you look at all the mock drafts, say they take, I don't know that Josh Simmons would be there, but maybe, or the tackle out of Oregon, maybe. Like all of a sudden, you have the makings when Cosby comes back of what looks to be a really, really good offensive line, and you've got a position group settled with that quarterback, and then you figure out the skill position players around it. I mean, that's a possibility here. That said, they have to look on defense clearly too. Like, and this goes back to what I think we've just been talking about. Like, I looked at the list of free agents and did not see a lot of players on there that I thought that they were going to take swings for. And that's why I'm not surprised a couple days into it that it feels like they need to do more. Yes, they do need to do more, but it wasn't going to happen with the big deals on day one because the players didn't warrant, in my opinion, them going after them to fill those needs.
Well, I think, it's funny because you hear from people over there too, where they look at these contracts given out and they're like, the one thing was like 90% of them were bad.
I
Now,
agree.
and I would
I
agree because
agree.
like, and here's the other, well, there's a couple things. Obviously in free agency, the contracts are always absurd right away, right? We get that. But I think you're also paying guys at positions of importance or need who maybe aren't at that level that you're paying them. And that to me is where you get into trouble. So I'm not surprised that I think Adam Peters likes that second wave of free agency type of guy. And so I'll be curious to see what they do from here. The hard part is when you look at like that line and your theory on the line with, or not theory, but your thought about like drafting a tackle, if that happens, if they did that, then you got that line set for a while, and that would be
Yes,
phenomenal for them. And you've got that side of the ball in really good shape. Um, they obviously need a lot of help on defense still, because as we record this at 9 o'clock on March 11th, they have some work to do.
they
There
do.
is 6 months before they play, but and the hard part is even before this opened, who are the guys that were going to be difference makers for them? Like if you guys sign Josh Sweat, I think he's a good end. I don't, does he change your defense? I don't know, right? Like Tunsil changes your offense to me. Um, Khalil Mack, I think would have been a terrific find for them. So I don't know who I would have spent big on in free agency. Now you can argue, you can talk about Javon Kinlaw and that signing, what it means. I think we talked like I do think they're going to use him differently than he has been. I don't know the plans exactly. We'll see if that works or not. I don't know. But he's not a difference maker. He's a guy that can be part of rotation, so they have some work to do on that side of the ball, but I really like the Tunsil thing. Now, the other thing is like Will Harris, that he signed him today, and that's basically the Jeremy Chin replacement. He's a physical guy. He's not a playmaker. He has good speed. I think he'll be a good, solid, fine player for them, And so I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I felt like Jeremy Chin's the only one so far that got away from
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
I thought that they wanted to re-sign him. I was a touch surprised that that didn't happen.
yeah.
And then when I saw the deal that Chin got, I didn't think it was that outrageous, the amount of money that he got. But, I guess there was a line, or maybe Chin wanted to test the market and he got more from them and he left. And so that's the only one so far that feels like got away from
Yeah.
them a little bit. Harris is, like, is he on equal footing with Chin? Maybe, in coverage, he might be a little bit better. But in terms of that physicality play, I liked what Chin brought. I know that
Oh
they
yeah.
liked what he brought. And so that was a touch surprising, but that was a hole, but they filled it very quickly. We can argue whether they got a better player, but maybe it's on par. Hopefully that's what they got. They created their own hole by releasing John Allen. I mean, we knew that they were going to do it. Like it
Right.
wasn't like it was a huge surprise. And this has been heading down this pathway for a long time, but they don't have anybody better than him on the roster. So that had to be replaced. And so this is the direction they've gone. I saw a lot of people complain about the price point. That is the last thing that I'm complaining about with this deal. Will he get to the place that they clearly think he can get to, right?
Yeah.
Because Adam Peters is bringing him in after he drafted him a few years ago, injury riddled first few years, goes to the Jets. They have a really down year. Jets people don't think he played particularly great. This team sees him, sees the upside, sees the kind of wild, large athleticism and goes, okay, let's use him differently and get more out of him. And maybe he outperforms this contract. But like when I saw people complain about the price point, I'm like, you realize that Osa Odigizua just got over 20 million a year. Milton Williams got like 26.
Yeah.
John was gonna make in the 20s against their cap. Like they just got him for the next couple of years at what appears to be 15 million per year, but it's actually less than that on the cap this year, and it's really a 2 year deal if they want to get out of it.
Yep.
And so I'm like looking at this going, like they took a shot on somebody. They're hoping they're going to get some upside out of him. The price point is not the issue I have with them. The question is, are they on par with where they were a year ago by bringing him in, or did they lose a step by replacing John Allen with him, which is what happened?
Right. And I think that's the thing. Like we can talk about the contract. The bottom line is John Allen's a better player and has been. But again, I don't know the plan for him. And so if you use him if they see him more as an end in situations, I think to me, that's how I would almost see it. But, and I think they'll use him there, but we'll see. But they still got to get another corner, but they weren't going to, again, we've talked about this. The reason why they traded for Lattimore is because they saw the free agent class and they felt like this guy would be better. Now they could end up being wrong about that, but that's why they did it. So that told you what they thought about this free agent class at that position. So, but you still need somebody else. And there are a handful of guys out there. They just need a guy who can kind of be in the right spots, right? But or who can affect either the quarterback or can make some plays because they don't have guys who can do either one of those enough right now. Like Frankie Louvu can, but that's one of the things to me that like they're going to have to continue to focus on is one of the things Dan Quinn talked about, affect the quarterback and also the takeaways. They just
Yeah.
don't have, those that's the big bugaboo with this defense. And the improvements so far in the offseason have been on offense.
Yes. But they're not done. And they
No,
got
no,
ways
it's
to
March
go
11th.
here.
March
And
11th.
I think there's a bottom line that I kind of came around to after kind of the afterglow of that season was over, because it really was a remarkable run. And you started just to believe in almost anything. But if you really looked at the roster, you'd go, that was unbelievable that they
Yeah.
did what they did with that group. And to replicate it, if you're being like sober about the whole thing, is they have a lot of improvements to make on this roster. Then you look at the options that are in free agency, and it's not really great, especially at the positions that they need. Like Ronnie Stanley was the only tackle on there that you would go try to attract and pay that kind of money to. And he, of course, 2 days before free agency opens, take it off the board. And so like I looked at this and I went, I feel like they're still 2 off seasons away. But I will say this, they're doing what they can to improve this team as quickly as possible. Like they preemptively went and traded for Deebo Samuel. They went and made what I thought was a statement deal by getting Laremy Tunsil because they had to get an impact player,
Right.
and they did. They found a way to do it, and now keep looking though. The defensive line, edge, another corner. They had to replace a safety suddenly. I know, like, we're hoping Jordan McGee is going to be Bobby Wagner's replacement, but you got to think about linebacker at some point. Like, they need more receivers. They only have 3 under contract. Like, they need more receivers to come in here. Like, there's a lot, if you really look and go, do they have the Niners roster of a couple of years ago? Do they have the Eagles roster of a year ago? I don't think so. They've got a lot of work to do. And they are, not victims, but they are subject to what their options are. Frankly, this offseason, at least in free agency, to me, did not offer a lot of options for solutions for these things. And I think they're doing a really good job addressing things. But I still feel like even at the end of all of this, and there's a second wave and third wave of free agency, and of course a draft, I still feel like we're going to see holes on this roster that hopefully can be addressed in the following offseason. This feels like 2 more off seasons away. But with this quarterback, and the way that they play and the chemistry that they had, like them replicating something close to last year and getting back to the playoffs, that doesn't feel off to me at all. Like, I think they got better here, especially with Tunsil. But if we're being sober and honest about it, there's a lot of holes that they have to address and deal with here, not only this spring, but next spring as well.
I agree. Mike came into the offseason thinking 2 good off seasons to not to get back to where they were, but to then consistently contend and beat the Eagles, right? Because really that's who it is right now. You look at
That's
that
right.
roster right now, that's a team. So I looked at 2, but because of Jaden Daniels, that certain things are still possible because of him. And I think the one thing that I'll be curious to see going from year 1 to year 2 with a lot of these rookies is what's the jump for a guy like, for Jaden? I mean, because he's going to, there's going to be a lot of stuff that he's going to learn too, having learned. And then you have Kingsbury in the second year in the offense, et cetera. And does Ben Sinnott make a jump? I'm not as, I think he's got to show a lot, right? Does McCaffrey take a step? He's got to show more. But to me, it's guys like McGee, Hampton, Jean Baptiste, like their roles, Tyler Owens, the undrafted guy. Like, I think could he factor a little bit more? And that's how you start to build that depth with them. None of them, I would say, are going to be these impact playmakers they need, but they just need good players, right? And because it's hard to find those impact guys. But yeah, the other thing, Bram, too, is would be nice for them is if they can trade back in the draft and pick up a couple more picks,
Yes.
and maybe address defensive line, address running back, get another guy, get one of those speedy backs in here to give you something you don't have. Cornerback you could get in the draft. There are a few interesting corners there, the receiver. So I think there's still some things that could be done to see how it shakes out. But that is the one thing left is and that's just the concern is can they get there defensively? And if so, what's the path?
Yeah. I mean, we're 2 days into free
Right.
agency,
March
but
11th.
right, but they haven't done anything yet to fortify the run defense.
Right.
And that's where my concern for the offseason really going in was also was offensive line, which I think they addressed.
Yeah.
I knew they would get another primary, secondary receiver
Right.
because they were just, that was actually the one list of players where I went, there's options there that you can go get somebody that could be impactful. And hopefully Debo is for them. And I expect them to bring in a couple other veterans because there's a lot of really good names that are available for them to come in and at bare minimum compete to be
Right.
on the roster with them. We'll see what they do anything in the draft. I agree with you about running back. I think that's a spot in the first or second round that if the right person was, if that North Carolina running back was there, it'd be hard to argue that it wouldn't be a massive upgrade to get him. But
Right.
what feels now that they did the Tunsil deal, what feels imminently necessitated for them to address is how do they fortify their run defense?
Yeah.
And that to me screams, what are you doing on the edges? And like, again, I wouldn't have paid that for Josh Sweat because I just don't think he was the right person. He's a very good player, but I don't think he was the right person at the right time. I agree with you about Khalil Mack. I think that would have been great if he were available. Shocker. He ended up not being available. So let's see what they do. This is where I think the focus needs to be for the rest of this offseason. What makes their run defense better? Who can they bring in? Who do they draft to help that side of the ball? Because at this point, I think it goes back to the whole point of they couldn't address everything, but they knocked off a couple of major needs, answered a couple of major questions, fortified a couple of units that look really different today than they did a couple of weeks ago. Now they got to do something about run defense, and that's going to take personnel. And let's see what Adam Peters comes up with over the next few weeks and into the draft.
Right. And you know, anybody who follows me knows I'm not a big believer in overreacting early on to this stuff because there is a long way to go. The other thing on offense that I like is getting a guy like Debo Samuel and getting one of the like this is why I would try and take one of those quote unquote home run backs in that draft, whether it's Hampton, whether it's one of my guys from Ohio State, because they're both very good, Henderson or Judkins. But
Yes.
get a guy in there who can get chunk plays, more chunk plays for you. Because you know it's funny. I was talking to Logan Paulson about this the other day. They were obviously excellent on fourth down last year. It's hard to sustain converting those all the time. So you need to put yourself in position where you can have, eliminate some of those, shorten some of those drives, I should say. Instead of 12 play, 80 yards, get a few more three. And they have that potential with Jaden as a quarterback, but it's nice to get more guys who can get those chunk plays for you, which then just makes you better. So, because I think the offense I can still be very good, but you'd like to see it expanded to get some more of those big plays.
Yes, they've needed. I thought the biggest issue on offense, well, once Cosme got hurt, offensive line was going to have to be addressed because we just don't know when he's going to be ready. But they needed explosive playmakers, and it could come from any of the positions. They got one, Debo Samuel. I agree about running back. I think that that's a need to bring in another running back. You've got B. Rob Eckler, both on final years of their contracts. Eckler's, of course, towards the end of his career. Robinson had a very strange end of season. Honestly, I didn't know what really was going on there. I'm willing to reboot it, bring him back in, let's go. But like he's not a home run hitting back in general. So like, can they find their home run hitting back to pair with him or supplant him at some point? Like that seems to be something I'd like to see. I was wondering what would happen with tight end. I think they ran it back because of options, mainly. Like there wasn't great options in front of them, and they're not going to probably spend a high draft pick on a tight end again. So they ran it back with that. So what do they do at receiver? There are some other speed receivers that are out there that they can add to this group now that they have Terry and Debo. Like, so I think like, yes, like there's a possibility that you're going to see a lot more explosiveness out of the offense. But that to me was outside of the offensive line after the Cosme injury. Issue one was help this team out, get more chunk plays. And I don't really even care what position group it came out of. They just need more
Right.
playmakers out there.
Right. Yeah, because the hard part, and Zach Ertz was terrific last year.
Yes.
But my concern as guys get to that mid-30s is the durability, because it's just your body's different. But the good thing that they have with guys like Ertz and Wagner is how well they prepare and how well they take care of their bodies. So you can put more trust in them. That's why they brought them back. And, but it's good to have him as a security blanket. But again, I'm with you. Like you don't have to spend a ton on to get another receiver in here. You just need a guy who offers you something else because you have a really good receiver in McLaurin. You have Debo Samuel. And I think, Noah Brown coming back will help. And he hasn't re-signed yet, but I don't know where else he's going to go coming off that injury, coming off another injury for him. But he can help. He can still help.
Yeah.
And then you add to that a little bit more and then you're okay. And at least you built that side of the ball very well and you continue to try and build that defense. And again, I just think a big key is can you add more picks to get a little bit more youth on that defensive side, youthful talent. And we'll see. So, the other guy who's out there, Justin Simmons, was talking on a podcast about how he has interest in coming here.
Yeah, I
And
saw that.
and I haven't heard his name. And, they have Quan Martin there. They just signed Will Harris. But Justin Simmons is a guy who makes plays. And so if this team wants to make plays and take the ball away more, well, there's a guy who can help you
Yeah.
potentially do that. So,
Yeah,
and
they
I don't
need
know.
another corner. I mean, they need another corner.
Yes,
They
for
need a
sure.
playmaker off the edge. Like they need on both sides of the ball, they need playmakers. And if you really again, if you really step further, the further you get away from that last season, just keep looking at what they did with the roster that they had. Like that was unbelievable. Like really unbelievable. And that's why now, as you step a little more away from it and you go, okay, how are we going to do that again? Well, you start seeing all the things that need to be improved for them to try to do that again and make it a regular practice. And, I think the Tunsil trade was step one to turning a unit that had a question mark around it into removing a lot of it and being able to focus your attention elsewhere to all of these other things that we're talking about.
1,000%. And that it allows you to go again with the first pick. You do not have to say you got to get this, right? You can, now you'd like to get a defensive end there possibly, but I don't know. Are you going to force it? So I think it was definitely a necessity, but I also just like the idea they've struggled to build that line for a long time now. And now you can look at that and rightfully say between Tunsil, Biotish, Cosme, and Coleman, you have a core four. And
That's
then,
right.
and I'll tell you what, like I like Nick Allegretti. I think he's a good pro. And if you put him in there, that's fine. Is he going to be, I think the other guys are going to be considered better players, but I think he fights, and he's a scrapper or whatever. And you can be okay there, right? So conceivably that group of five could be together for a few years. That continuity is vital. And so I think they've done it. Like that's the thing I really like about what they've done. So, and despite, nothing yet on the defense where you consider it a big upgrade, I do like that. And so I think their team is better, but they definitely have areas that you've got to address going forward. And you know who knows that? Adam Peters and Dan
Yeah.
Quinn. So they know.
The depth on the offensive line was a problem a year ago. It got
Yes.
exacerbated. So what if Allegretti becomes their primary backup? I like that.
Oh,
Way more than what the
that's
situation was
fantastic.
a year ago.
Yeah,
If that's where and you know what, people forget these parts of this. Go look at what his salary is. They're not paying him like
no,
he's a frontline starter here.
no,
They're paying him like a fill-in starter, primary backup player. That's the
correct.
salary range that he is currently in. And if that's where he ends up, then I feel really good about the depth on the interior offensive line that if they have to turn to him for a few games, I know what he can do. So we're about trying to make this whole thing top to bottom better. The Eagles have the best roster in football. That might be changing a little bit off of the people
They've
that
lost
they've
a few
lost.
guys.
They have lost a few guys, and this is probably a different conversation for a different day. I'm actually not worried about the guys that they lost. If I'm them, I actually feel pretty. The CJ Gardner Johnson one's a little strange and probably feels like for some reason they needed to get away from each other. All the other ones, they weren't going to pay Milton Williams. They weren't going to pay Josh Sweat, but they might have enough depth on that team that they overcome that. And I think they're going to be just fine.
I
Maybe
think
they're
they'll be
not the
fine.
number one defense again, but they're going to be I'm not worried. Top to bottom, they have the best roster in the NFL. Washington is not there yet, and it's going to take a while to try to get to that point where we say that. But the wild card of the whole thing obviously is we have number five. Number five changes everything for this team and gives them the opportunity, not unlike Pat Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen, where if you're a little weak at receiver, he might make up for that. If you're a little weak at this position, he may make up for that. But what I would like to see now that they've worked on the offensive line, they've got to fix their run defense and make it better than it was a year ago. Otherwise, when we talk about the team that they're chasing, the Eagles, who just gave Saquon Barkley off a magical season $1 billion, they're not going anywhere. That's got to get better.
And here's the funny thing, like look at how many guys had their best season in the NFL at receiver. It was Terry, it was Olamide, it was
Yeah.
De'Ami Brown.
Yes.
Zach Ertz had one of his best years in years. I mean, it's like there's a reason for that. With Kingsbury's a very good coordinator, Gene Daniels is really good, and that's not going to change. So like all the roster stuff, and which we both are in agreement with, the hard part to always, when you look at the roster is like, but number 5 is different, right? And the one thing I'll say about the Eagles, and I think it's a terrific organization. I mean, there's a reason why they've gone to 3 Super Bowls with 3 different head coaches now and won 2 of them. It's because they have a really good organization, but they have lost a few starters. And, on defense, and like, while Sweat, is he an all pro? No, but he is a good player, Williams,
Yeah.
good player. While they'll still be very good, it's, you do lose something, right? And Gardner
Yeah.
Johnson, like, he's a good player now, but that's the second time they've gotten rid of him. So who knows? And the other part with Barkley, Bram, is like it's hard to duplicate what he did. It just is. So,
Yeah.
we'll
I
see.
wouldn't expect him to do that again. But like, okay, like Sweat, I think is a loss for them. He is. I don't think you just replace a guy like that. Milton Williams, that's a loss. He had a really, really good year. I think he deserved to get a nice payday on the open market. That just means Jordan Davis is playing more. Like,
He can't play more. He plays every snap.
no, Milton Williams was playing next to
Oh, I was
Jalen
talking about
Carter.
Jalen Carter. I'm sorry. I was
Yeah.
thinking Jalen Carter.
Or
Sorry.
they'll tell you about Moro
Jordan
Ojomo.
Davis will play more. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's a
Jalen-
pretty darn good fallback
oh,
plan.
there's no doubt, but you still lose, whether it's depth, whether it's rotation, there's
100%.
still a loss. Now, how severe is it? And then you look at their offense, say, well, they haven't really lost anything there. So it's still pretty good. They will be very good. That's still the team to beat. And I agree. But I do like, again, what they've done with this offensive line, and we'll see where they go. And again, the second wave of free agency is what Peters, I think, likes to feast on. I think, he grew up in the New England system, right? That's a lot of what they did. You don't overspend for guys in that first wave. It's not just about getting bargains, it's about getting value. And, people know this. I always say fit. More work to be done though, Bram. And what's funny is like, it's nice to be talking about this after the year they had, rather than like, hey, how do you improve on another 7-win season or something like that, which was always the trouble before, like whether it was Jay, whether it was Ron, like, all right, they won between 7 and 9 games. Can they take that next step? And the answer was always no. And, it's funny because I even go back to like 12 when they had Robert and they had that really good finish and the good year, and they couldn't build on it. Like they didn't have the cap space, they didn't have the draft picks, couldn't build on it. This they are still able to build on. And you have a quarterback who is going to develop more on his own than anybody else that I've covered here. So, still in a pretty good spot. March 11th, more work to be done. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah, ton of work to be done. I agree. I like this. I lauded them last year for all of the deals that they did, which were for not very long term, not crazy money. If you're never going to hit 100%. If any of them don't work out, you can get out of any of them. Like they're doing similar things so far here, but that's not where they're just shopping. So like anyone else who's like, if you're not paying attention, they traded for Marshawn Lattimore. He makes a big salary. They traded for Deebo Samuel. He makes a big salary. They traded for Laremy Tunsil. They gave Cosme money. They're doing all the things. Like, and I think they're wise. Like in this free agent class, this is what like I was bummed about it coming into it because off the 12-win season, off as far as they went, I went, you know what? If they can go fix this in free agency, then we're off to the races again. And then the list comes out of who's available, and you go, they can't do that. And this group, I think, wisely didn't just take the bait and go, well, we need an edge rusher, should just throw a ton of money to somebody. They're not going to do that. They're going to think through it. And I appreciate that because what you can't get back are bad deals. They know that. You can't get them back. Come on, we lived that for years. Before Snyder stopped spending like that, we lived that for years where they thought the answer was every spring spending on everyone else's players, and that never worked out here.
No, it did not. And it's funny how we have to remind people every spring, not everybody, but certainly a lot of people. And I remember even last during the fall reminding people like there was a lot of disappointment over free agency last offseason as well. And
Yeah.
they seemed to be okay. And again, part of that was Jaden Daniels, but Jaden Daniels still here. So
I reiterate on the Kinlaw deal. When I saw the numbers and I saw the reaction to the numbers, I'm sitting there going, "What? This is in all reality, this is a 2-year deal. Like, there's an easy out on the third year, and he's making like 30 to 50% lower than the defensive tackles on the market. Why do you think this is a bad deal? It's not."
Well, I think with him, it's more about the production than it is the
Yeah,
contract. So
sure.
does he produce? And he's been just very inconsistent.
Agreed.
And I think so but again, always go back to, I think Dan Quinn has said it, and I do think I'm right on this, that there's a different plan for him than what we've seen him in before. So see where it goes, Bram, but always fun to watch what they do and to see then how it fits, because there will be more guys signed. They have a lot of open roster spots. They have to sign a lot more players. So
Yeah.
we'll keep everybody tuned into that, and you can go if whenever news breaks, ESPN.com we have a free agent tracker, so analysis on every free agent signed, including Jeremy McNichols, whom they re-signed today. I wanted to point that out. I like Jeremy, tough guy, hustles, good effort guy, good to have on the roster. But it's going to be harder for him to make it this year if they go out and get a running back. Anyways, Bram, that's it. I appreciate you joining me. Thanks as always, Bram.
Yep.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Bram for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. Like I said, as news warrants, I'll be posting more videos or podcasts. So if there's a big deal tomorrow on Wednesday, I'll do another one Wednesday night. If not, you'll hear from me again Thursday morning. So I'll talk to you next time.